It started with a beep. Sharp, unforgiving, final. The kind of sound that doesn't just reject a QR code, it rejects a person. At Gate B1 of True Sky's private charter terminal, a black man in a linen shirt stood perfectly still, phone in hand. His boarding pass had just been scanned, or tried to. Not recognized. The system flashed red. Captain Linda Crowley's jaw tensed. "You'll need to step aside, sir." She said sir, but her tone dragged the word down like a stain. The man didn't move. He didn't argue. He just looked at the screen, then at her, as if this wasn't the first time he had watched a system malfunction. Selectively. From seat 2A, Travis Sinclair, a man in a navy suit and entitlement sharp as his cufflinks, stood up, inserted himself where he wasn't needed. "He's not listed. I know every exec on this manifest. He's not one of us." Us. That single syllable slithered through the cabin like smoke. No one said a word, but every eye looked, some with pity, some with suspicion, and one or two just maybe with shame. 12 minutes from that moment, the man they tried to erase would rewrite the rules of the sky. He would not raise his voice. He would not beg for validation. He would expose bias with the same calm he used to build an empire. Because he wasn't just any passenger. He was the owner of the aircraft, the architect of the very system now trying to spit him out. And the story you're about to hear is not fiction. It is a mirror, held up high, held steady, held unflinchingly. Before we begin, drop your city in the comments below. Tell us where you're watching from. And if you've ever been told, you don't belong here, this one's for you. Like, subscribe, share it because silence flies too easily these days. And now, without noise, without permission, the cabin begins to shift. Something is about to take off, but it isn't the plane. There's a sound some people only hear once in a lifetime. For others, it becomes a pattern, a signature of exclusion. Beep. Red. Unrecognized black male at Gate B1. The screen announced calm. Cold. Precise. Malcolm Reed stood still, one hand holding his phone, the other tucked lightly into his linen blazer pocket. He neither smiled nor frowned. He had expected something, but even he hadn't expected this early turbulence. Captain Linda Crowley didn't meet his eyes. She stood at the boarding threshold like a statue guarding a gate that was never hers to own, her uniform crisp, her tone even crisper. "Sir," she said, nodding toward the screen, "your code isn't scanning. You're not listed." Malcolm gently turned his phone toward her. "I believe this is the correct manifest QR. Kindly try again." Linda shook her head, not even glancing. "It's not about the code. You're not in the system. That's final." She didn't say you don't belong, but it was nestled in every syllable. Another pause. Then came the twist of her mouth that barely their smirk people mistake for protocol. "You people always push the line," she added, almost under her breath. Malcolm heard it. So did the silence behind him. No one moved. The jet's interior, immaculate in cream leather and chrome, felt suddenly stiff, too quiet. Even the hum of the auxiliary power unit seemed to lean in. The phrase lingered like cheap perfume, "you people." It was a slip, or maybe it wasn't. Either way, it dripped with generations of suggestion. Malcolm didn't respond. Not yet. He simply turned his phone face down in his palm and looked at the door behind Linda as if calculating not whether he would enter, but how. And somewhere in the cabin, someone shifted. A cough, a clipped breath, a judgment unspoken but unmistakably present. 12 seats, one aisle, one moment that now held the weight of every gate ever blocked for the wrong reasons. And Malcolm Reed, silent, composed, decided he would not turn around. From seat 2A, Travis Sinclair exhaled a sharp, annoyed laugh, the kind reserved for parking violations and people you've already decided are beneath you. He stood up, tugging his blazer down like the moment was wrinkling his image. "That's enough," Travis declared. "We've got executives with real business here. He's not on the manifest." He marched forward, snatched the phone from Malcolm's hand without permission, and glanced at the code. Then, With theatrical disdain, he tore the boarding screen off the display and let it fall to the floor between them. "You're not listed. That's the end of it." No one stopped him. No one asked, "Who are you to decide?" Captain Linda didn't flinch. Jasmine Rowe, the flight attendant stationed just behind her, echoed like a recording passenger not verified. Manifest locked. Her voice carried no warmth, no curiosity, just cold compliance. Behind them, eyes began to rise from tablets and espresso cups. Naomi Walker, mid-40s, a civil rights attorney with a quiet posture but a courtroom mind, narrowed her eyes from seat 3C. She didn't speak. Not yet. Next to her, Jared Cole, a data analyst for a major fintech, watched without blinking. His thumb hovered near his phone, but didn't move. He knew better than to be first. Further back, Omar Blake, a reporter who had spent 3 years covering institutional bias in elite industries, uncapped his pen and wrote one word: predictable. They didn't speak because they understood something Malcolm knew well. When a black man is challenged for simply existing, any word he speaks too soon becomes his own indictment. So instead, they watched, not as spectators, as witnesses. Jasmine leaned in toward the captain. "Should I alert security?" Linda didn't nod. She didn't need to. Across the aisle, a passenger pulled their scarf a little closer. No one asked Malcolm if he needed help. No one returned his phone. But every eye in that cabin had now seen something that couldn't be unseen. A man standing still. And a system collapsing louder than any alarm. Malcolm knelt slowly, deliberately, and picked up the device that had been torn from his hand. He wiped the screen with the inside of his cuff, then stood straight again. His voice didn't rise, it landed. "I don't need a badge," he said. "I need the truth." The sentence cracked the air like dry wood under pressure. It wasn't a rebuttal. It was a reveal. Linda blinked. Travis shifted. Arms crossed. "Truth," Travis scoffed. "You think you can show up, dressed like some mid-tier speaker, and bluff your way into a seat like 2A? Malcolm turned to him, gaze steady. "I didn't bluff," he said softly. "I boarded." The distinction was simple and damning. Behind him, Naomi's eyes met Omar's. Jared finally clicked his phone open but didn't record. Not yet. Instead, he began a live note. Title: "The Passenger They Wanted to Miss." Jasmine tried again. "We have policies." Malcolm interrupted, not by speaking louder, but by not stepping back. "And who made those policies?" he asked. No one answered. The cabin, once divided by rows and rolls, now split along something deeper, those who saw what was unfolding, and those still pretending not to. Somewhere down the aisle, a woman whispered to her partner, "He's handling this better than I would." Yes, because Malcolm wasn't here to be impressive. He was here to be undeniable. The plane had not moved an inch, but the gravity inside it had already shifted. Jared Cole took a deep breath, long enough to hide his anger, short enough to keep his hands steady. The phone was in his coat pocket. The camera was in his hand. The cabin light reflected off the lens as if the aircraft itself was watching. His finger hovered over the record button. But before the camera turned on, a hand gently, firmly, landed on his wrist. Naomi, her black-rimmed glasses still perched perfectly on her nose, but her eyes sharp as a scalpel. "Don't record," she whispered. "Not yet. Silence is working. Don't scare it away." Jared swallowed hard and nodded, but he didn't put the phone away. Just then, the passenger recognition system pinged again. No one touched the scanner. No new person entered the cabin, but the voice repeated. "Unverified entry, black male. Risk level medium." This time, everyone heard it. Captain Linda turned toward Jasmine, as if to confirm she wasn't hallucinating. But before anyone could speak, Malcolm raised his phone to his ear. His voice was calm, not strained, not afraid. "Jada," he said, "initiate silent protocol." There was a 1-second pause. Then a cool, composed woman's voice responded. "Protocol active. Secure channel. Logging from timestamp 0." No one else in the cabin understood. But Jared did. Naomi did. Omar most definitely did. Malcolm had just triggered a full documentation process. No loud recordings, no arguing, just truth, tracked in real time, word by word, action by action. Linda frowned. "Who's Jada?" Malcolm didn't answer, but something had changed in his eyes. He was no longer the man waiting for approval. He was now the one watching those who denied him. Omar Blake wasn't the impulsive type. He'd waited hours outside courtrooms just for a nod from a witness, but this moment didn't require waiting. His eyes locked onto the glossy black card Travis Sinclair had just waved like a talisman. "True Sky Elite Black Card," Travis said. "What's he got? No logo? No code? No authority?" Omar narrowed his eyes. He'd written an expose 18 months ago about counterfeit VIP access cards spreading through the charter industry. His gaze scanned the fine print in the card's corner. He took one step forward, as if turning a page. "This card is invalid," Omar said clear and steady. "That model was discontinued last June." Jasmine blinked. Linda turned. Travis flushed. "You're making that up," Travis stammered. "I was issued this just last month." Omar held the card under the cabin light, pointing at the outdated ID tag. "This isn't proof of authority," he said. "It's evidence of fraud." No one clapped, but the cabin itself seemed to lean toward the truth. Malcolm stood silent, then glanced at his phone. "Jada," he said, "log the name Travis Sinclair. Action presenting fake credentials. Tampering with identity protocol." Jada replied instantly. "Noted. Marked. Logged in archive. The record that will remain." Linda squinted. "You think dropping fancy names scares me?" Malcolm met her eyes. "No, I just make the truth harder to ignore." The cabin now had a new kind of pressure, not from air compression, but from uncomfortable clarity. Linda stepped forward, her leather shoes clicking on the polished floor. "You'll regret staying here any longer than necessary," she said, each word sharp. "This is no longer a mistake. It's a security breach." Malcolm didn't flinch. He turned to the window, eyes on the runway in the morning sun, then looked back, no arrogance, just the stillness of a calm lake. "I'd only regret it," he said slowly, "if regret outweighed the truth." A passenger in the cabin coughed quietly, not from illness, from fear. Linda sneered. "You want to play victim? Fine. I'll give you something to cry to your lawyer about." Naomi stood up for the first time. "Captain," she said, "before you threaten anyone, you should ask who's documenting you." Linda turned sharply. Naomi pointed at Malcolm. "He's not filming. He's building a record, and records can't be deleted by hand." A stillness descended longer than the hum of the idle engines. Malcolm didn't shout. He just stepped half a pace back and spoke loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "Silence isn't surrender, it's preparation." And now, the cabin no longer knew who was a passenger and who was a witness. People had started to listen not because of noise, but because the truth had begun to speak. Chloe Rowe took a step back as Linda's glare cut into her. Although she'd only been working at True Sky for 2 months, she already understood the most important rule in first class wasn't about serving passengers. It was about submitting to power. Linda turned to her, voice low but sharp. "Passenger at door 3 hasn't been verified. Name's not in the iPad." Chloe nodded instinctively, her fingers gliding over the control panel. The tablet displayed the VIP list neat, sterile, cold. She glanced up at Malcolm, then spoke like reciting a line from a script she had memorized. "Your name isn't in the system." The entire cabin fell silent. Malcolm took half a step forward, still calm. "Are you checking, or just repeating what someone told you?" Chloe hesitated. No one had ever asked her that. I'm just reading from the iPad," she whispered. "The list was locked this morning." Malcolm said nothing, but his eyes pressed a truth out of her trembling voice. "From seat 3A. Jared frowned. Naomi clenched her hands on her lap. Omar leaned forward slightly, pen still moving. Malcolm nodded slowly. "Thank you," "Chloe," he said, pulling out his phone again. Linda scowled. "What now, calling in more of your little files?" Malcolm didn't answer her. He simply tapped the screen. This time, Jada's voice came through not his earpiece but the cabin speakers. "Secure channel active. Admin override ready. Standing by for system request." The cabin froze. Chloe's mouth opened, but no words came. Linda stepped back. "Admin override." Travis scoffed. "Who do you think you are?" Malcolm looked directly at the identity scanner near the cabin door. I just want to know who deleted my name." He stood still, as if the cabin was rotating around him, not the other way around. His words came slowly, each one like a knock on the glass of truth. "Jada, grant Ghost admin access. Retrieve the passenger list, edit history from 6:00 a.m. today." Jada's voice cut in, cold as steel. "Ghost admin protocol engaged. Retrieving edit log. Log found. 3 entries. 1 deletion at 06:23 a.m. User D. Boone." The cabin seemed to hold its breath. Linda's hands tightened behind her back. Chloe shrank to the rear of the cabin, eyes wide. Omar scribbled 3 lines, pen scratching loudly. Jared looked up from his phone. Naomi inhaled, not surprised. Malcolm tilted his head. "D. Boone," he repeated. "Daniel Boone. First officer." "Correct." No one answered, but all eyes turned toward the cockpit. Linda stepped forward, voice slicing the air. "That was an error. Systems can glitch. There's no need to—" "Errors don't type names," Malcolm interrupted. "Errors don't delete people." He turned toward the cabin, eyes meeting each passenger's. "We're about to take off. But if someone can be erased with one tap, then this flight was never safe to begin with." Daniel Boone, seated near the cockpit door, lowered his head. But he said nothing. Not yet. Malcolm turned back to his screen. "Jada, log the following Daniel Boone edited passenger data at 6:23 a.m. Label attempted erasure of listed passenger." Jada replied. "Event logged, timestamp confirmed, statement secured." And in that moment, the cabin was no longer a space of luxury. It became a vault for evidence. Daniel Boone wasn't a bad man, but he stayed silent when it mattered. And this morning, he'd done the indefensible because Linda had sent a 2-word message override now. Malcolm turned toward the front, gaze not angry, just clear, like high noon. "You're the one who changed the list," he said. Daniel swallowed. I didn't know it was you." "But you knew it was someone," Malcolm replied. "And you knew it was wrong." Daniel nodded slowly, unable to meet his eyes. Linda jumped in. "He followed orders. If someone needs to take responsibility, I'll—" Malcolm raised a hand, cutting her off. "Uniforms don't grant immunity." Naomi stood. "In fact," she said, "uniforms make responsibility clearer." The cabin stirred. Chloe looked down at her shoes. Travis crossed his legs, face twisted in tension. Malcolm took one more step toward Daniel. "I don't blame you for being afraid," he said. "I'm just disappointed you let fear replace the truth." Daniel exhaled and finally spoke clearly. "I deleted your name. Linda said you were an unverified guest. I didn't know who you were, but I knew. It wasn't right." Malcolm nodded. "Thank you for finally saying it." Jada, through the speaker. "Statement from Daniel Boone recorded, edit log confirmed." And the cabin, once just a vessel flying through sky, now became something else entirely. A space for confrontation, with the system, with the list, with themselves. Jasmine Rowe stood tucked beside the mini-service cabinet, hands clasped tightly together as if to keep her heartbeat from breaking out of her chest. She didn't dare look anyone in the eye, especially not Malcolm Reed. But Malcolm looked at her. His voice was low, not harsh, just inescapable. "Can I ask you one question, Jasmine?" She looked up, blinking rapidly. Yes." Malcolm didn't move forward. He kept enough distance to avoid intimidating her, but close enough not to be ignored. "How many QR codes were denied today?" Jasmine said nothing. 3, came a quiet voice behind her. "Chloe, Since this morning, there were 3. Malcolm nodded. And those 3 passengers, who were they? No one answered. Do you remember what they looked like? He pressed gently, never taking his eyes off Jasmine. All 3 of them. Were they people of color? Chloe stared at the floor. Jasmine froze, lips pressed tight. No one denied it. Naomi stepped forward from row 3. You're pointing out something everyone sees, but no one says. Discrimination doesn't always shout. Sometimes it shows up as 3 QR codes. That don't work. Linda snapped from the front of the cabin. Don't turn this into a race issue. If the system fails, we fix it. Don't place blame. Malcolm didn't move. Then fix it, but don't deflect it. He turned to Chloe. You said 3 were denied. Where are their names? Chloe trembled. Her voice barely came out. We don't log them. The system auto-deletes failed scans after 5 minutes. Malcolm exhaled, not angry. Just someone who had confirmed something he didn't want to be true. Then I'm not the first. I'm just the first who didn't step back. The cabin thickened like fog before a storm. No one moved. No one checked their watch. Even time seemed to pause, waiting for someone to speak the truth. Chloe hesitated, then walked to the cabinet near the cockpit. She reached behind the compartment for technical documents and pulled out a small, worn, brown leather notebook. No name, no label. This is the captain's, she whispered. Linda spun around. No, that's a personal log. But Chloe handed it to Naomi, whose fingers gripped it like she was holding something not made of paper, but of bone. Naomi opened it, flipping through the pages. An index. Color codes. Strange markings next to passenger names. Omar stepped up silently, glanced over, and nodded. This is a classification system. Examples, Jared asked. Naomi read aloud. 3A, black female, possibly forged credentials. 2C, accent marked, potential reputation risk. 5B, appears Latinx, traveling alone, monitor. Linda stormed forward and yanked the book. It's for noting passenger behavior. I need to assess risk. Malcolm stepped in quietly. You're not assessing risk. You're assessing people. Naomi closed the book and handed it to Omar. This isn't a personal journal. It's a map of bias. Chloe exhaled as if feeling lighter for the first time all day. From seat 2A, Travis scoffed. It's just notes. No need to get dramatic. Jared spoke up. Notes are fine. But when notes get someone erased from the system, they become weapons. Just then, the sharp click of shoes echoed from the cockpit door. Officer Ray Mitchell, the flight's head of security, stepped out, face neutral, movements firm. Mr. Reed, Ray said, due to disruption and creating an unstable atmosphere, I've been instructed to escort you off this aircraft. Malcolm wasn't surprised. He stood still. By whom? Ray didn't answer. He stepped forward and placed a hand on Malcolm's shoulder. But at that moment, Naomi stepped in. Don't touch him, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, just final. Ray paused. Ma'am. There's no ma'am anymore, Naomi said. This isn't a procedure. This is suppression. Jared shot up from his seat. Omar stopped writing. Chloe covered her mouth. The cabin held its breath. Linda rushed forward. I'm the captain. I have the right to remove a disruptive passenger. Naomi didn't budge. And I'm a civil rights attorney. And I declare your actions have crossed legal boundaries. Malcolm gently removed Ray's hand from his shoulder. No violence. No force. I'll leave, he said. If the reason is truth, but if the reason is fear of my skin color, then I'm staying, until everyone sees it. The cabin erupted, not in shouting, in silence. A silence so loud, no one could look away. Malcolm tapped gently on the watch on his left wrist. A soft ping echoed. His phone screen lit up again, an incoming call connected automatically. Jada, he said, eyes locked on Officer Ray. Initiate executive-level verification. Personal ID, Malcolm Reed. A few passengers leaned forward. Someone whispered from the back. executive, as if they had just dropped a lifelong assumption onto the floor. Jada responded within 2 seconds. CEO clearance authenticated, all logs, security levels, and chain of command match Mr. Malcolm Reed. You are speaking to the sole owner of True Sky Executive Charter. There were audible gasps from both ends of the cabin. Chloe stepped back. Daniel lowered his head. Linda stood frozen, fists clenched as if she wanted to rip off her own uniform. Malcolm took half a step forward, not loud, not showy. I don't need power to board my own aircraft, he said. I just wanted to see what happens when a black man steps in without a business card, without a suit, just a valid QR code. Linda pressed her lips tight. Travis muttered, "This can't be." Naomi called out from row 3. "Do you believe it now, or do you still need a certificate of authorized blackness?" No one laughed. No one argued. All eyes turned back to Malcolm, not as a stranger in the wrong seat, but as the owner, quietly reclaiming his name. As the air hung somewhere between stunned and ashamed, Malcolm reached for the control panel on the cabin wall, a large LED screen powered on, typically used to show flight paths. He typed in a command. The screen flickered. Then a video began to play. Internal cabin camera, a wide angle from above, capturing everything since Malcolm first stepped inside. Everything was clear. Linda glanced and turned away, shaking her head before even scanning the QR code. Travis stood up and snatched the phone from Malcolm's hand. Chloe glanced at Linda and declared, "No name found," before even checking the iPad. Daniel passed by the access terminal at 6:23 a.m. and clearly tapped a command to alter the list. No narration, no effects, just truth too raw to need retelling. Omar leaned toward Naomi and whispered, "He didn't film a video. He made the whole plane record the story for him." Linda opened her mouth. "This is a violation of privacy. Internal use of cabin cameras is prohibited." Malcolm simply replied, "And using people as shadows isn't allowed either." Jada's voice came through the speaker again. Internal camera activation authorized under Executive Clause 14.2. Triggered by company ownership. Compliant with Level 3 internal security protocols. Travis snapped. "This is abuse of power, a setup." Malcolm turned calmly. "No, this is evidence." He slowly turned to face the entire cabin, not to interrogate but to confirm. Then he spoke clearly, evenly, without anger. "Linda Crowley, Captain terminated immediately for racial misconduct, abuse of authority, and professional ethics violations." Linda opened her mouth to protest, but Malcolm was already looking elsewhere. "Daniel Boone, First Officer, terminated for intentionally altering internal records to erase a rightful passenger." Daniel nodded, as if he'd been expecting this since his name appeared in the system log. "Jasmine Rowe, flight attendant, dismissed for complicit repetition of false information, refusal to verify, and breach of professional ethics." Jasmine whispered, "I was just following." "And because you were just following," Malcolm said, "is why we must stop." Finally, he turned to Ray Mitchell. "Officer Ray dismissed for unauthorized physical contact, acting on orders without verification, and threatening a passenger who committed no violation." Ray looked like he might object, but then he stayed silent. No sirens, no alarms, only silence, heavy, undeniable. Then from the back of the cabin, clapping, Naomi. Then Jared, then Omar, then others. No one cheered. They simply stood and applauded truth finally stepping out of silence. The applause softened, like waves gently rolling onto shore. Malcolm stood in the aisle, the seats on either side still warm from the awakening that had just taken place. But he knew a few rounds of applause weren't enough to change the system. You don't just fire people and then fly on like nothing happened. So he took a slow, deep breath and spoke as if delivering a declaration, one that needed no paper. "I didn't come here to demonstrate power. I came to restructure it." He stepped toward the central control panel and tapped open a new screen. "I'm officially launching the True Sky Justice Fund, a $20 million initiative focused on 3 specific goals." Naomi sat back in her seat, silent. Jared scribbled into his notes. Omar stopped writing. He just watched. 1 scholarships for Black and minority individuals pursuing aviation careers. 2 mandatory ethics training for all flight crew members. 3. Hiring an independent audit team to review patterns of bias, whether quiet or overt, on every flight. No one spoke, but the air in the cabin shifted. We've flown too long with just 2 kinds of passengers, those invited on board, and those presumed suspect. Starting today, there will be a 3rd kind, those trusted. Travis curled his lip, but said nothing. Linda had vanished from the horizon. Daniel, Jasmine, and Ray were no longer in the cabin. What remained were just people and a hope that had just taken off. As Malcolm turned to walk toward the back of the cabin, Chloe Rose stood up. Her hands trembled, but her eyes no longer darted away. "Mr. Reed." Malcolm turned. Chloe stepped forward, then paused in front of him and pulled a tablet from her coat pocket. "There's something I need you to see." He took it. The screen lit up with a folder titled Routine Logs. Jared tilted his head. Naomi squinted. Omar stood. "I was instructed to delete internal complaints from previous flights," Chloe said, her voice hoarse. "I didn't. I backed them all up here." Malcolm scanned the screen. Files labeled with dates, flight numbers, staff IDs, and content documenting reports of racial bias, class discrimination, and abuse of authority. Naomi asked quietly. "How many cases?" Chloe whispered. "More than 30, in the past 3 months alone." Omar barely breathed. "And none were addressed?" Chloe shook her head. "I submitted them, but the compliance software was reprogrammed. Those reports never reached anyone with authority, until today." Malcolm synced the tablet with Jada via Bluetooth. "Jada, sync the full routine logs folder. Share encrypted access with the True Sky Executive Council." Jada responded. "Uploaded, emergency alert sent, all files backed up and encrypted." Malcolm nodded. Then silence is no longer an option. The cabin no longer felt like a cabin. It felt like a listening hall where people had stopped hearing with their ears and started sensing with their skin. A silence not born of fear, but of witnessing something larger than themselves. Malcolm didn't return to his seat. He stood in the aisle, sunlight from the window catching his cheekbone, highlighting a calm that can't be bought. He looked toward the front of the plane, toward the system that once tried to erase him from this very cabin. This flight isn't delayed. It just took extra time to find the right altitude. A line that sounded light but made someone's chest tighten. Naomi turned to Jared. "I don't think I've ever seen anyone lead like this." Jared nodded. "Not from a stage. From the seat they tried to deny him." Omar exhaled. He didn't have to speak. The system confessed for him. Naomi added, "And because of that, everyone started to see." Malcolm didn't say another word. He simply looked toward the cabin door. The morning light still spilled across the floor, and this time, it no longer fell on the shadow of a man being stopped, but on the footsteps of a man, clearing the path ahead. Malcolm walked toward the central control panel in the cabin unhurried, as if every step had already been mapped long ago. He opened the internal interface, not to play another video this time, but to do something few CEOs had ever dared: cross-check emotion with data. "Jada," he said, "activate the AI ethics monitor. Pull all cabin data from the last 30 minutes." The screen lit up with a dashboard familiar to linguists and behavioral analysts, a heat map analyzing tone, speech patterns, discriminatory keywords, and facial expressions using AI. Jada confirmed. Processed. Results displayed by color: red negative bias, green neutral, purple positive bias. Malcolm didn't need to explain. The data spoke for itself. On screen, the voice samples loaded. "Linda, you people always push the line. Bias level, 92%. Travis, he's not listed. Not one of us. Bias level, 89%. From the logbook, accent marked. Possible risk. Ethno-linguistic discrimination, 95%. The cabin went still, like a stone temple. Omar stood, eyes locked on the screen. We always think discrimination is just in what people say out loud, but it's in the tone, in the glance, in how someone says, "You're not on the list," without even needing to say it. Naomi nodded, her eyes fixed on the screen. Jared whispered, "Not everyone has a camera, but now, the system itself is bearing witness." Malcolm stepped aside so the cabin could see more clearly. Data doesn't have emotion. It only knows how to be honest. A faint cough sounded near the front of the cabin. Daniel Boone, the recently dismissed first officer, slowly stood up. His head wasn't held high, but he also didn't hide. "I need to say this," he began, voice low, but sincere. Malcolm didn't stop him. He simply gave a nod. Daniel swallowed. "Last month, I joined an internal group. They were against the diversity fund you launched. Said you were changing the structure too fast. That prioritizing minorities meant abandoning qualified people." Jared exhaled sharply. Omar lifted his pen. Naomi straightened her spine. Daniel continued. "At first, I just listened. Then I was given a small task to temporarily modify your profile in the system, flagged for review." Malcolm didn't frown. He simply said, "You weren't afraid I'd be erased. You were afraid I'd be validated." Daniel nodded. "I didn't think I was biased. I just felt uneasy, like my place was slipping." Malcolm replied gently. "You weren't afraid of being excluded. You were afraid of sharing the table. You weren't afraid of being invisible. You were afraid of being seen as equal." Naomi added, "And fear, if left unchallenged, becomes a system." The cabin was silent. Chloe looked at the floor. Travis no longer sat upright. He seemed to shrink with every passing second. Then, a man near the back stood up. He hadn't spoken all flight. His eyes were red, hands resting on his knees. "I didn't think this was about race," he said. "I thought it was just about protocol, about protecting standards." A pause. Naomi didn't shout. She didn't scold. She took half a step forward, voice barely above a whisper, but heavy with history. "Then why does your fear feel so familiar? Why is it always people who look like us who get removed?" The man sat back down, not because he was silenced, but because he had no argument left to stand on. Malcolm didn't interfere. He let the truth unfold through the eyes and observations of the people around him. A young passenger, possibly a student, spoke softly. "At first, I thought he must be wrong, because the system didn't scan him. But now I understand. The system was built not to." Naomi nodded, Jared whispered. "Awakening doesn't come from proof. It comes from daring to look a second time." Omar scribbled one final line in his notebook. "Today, an entire cabin relearned what fairness means. Not from textbooks, from real people, in a real moment." And in this space built for Ascent people, for the first time, began to touch the ground with truth. The cabin was bathed in the soft slant of morning light, not harsh, but the kind of light that follows an awakening when everything has been exposed, and nothing remains hidden. An older man rose from the last row, silver hair, a deep blue flight jacket with a worn pilot insignia. He held onto the seatback as if his hand had long learned to steady itself through turbulence. "My name is Henry Lowell," he said, with the kind of voice that had once symbolized 30 years of trusted captainship. "I trained Linda Crowley. I was the one who recommended her for captain." Heads turned. "I used to believe that by protecting Linda, I was defending the next generation, but I was wrong." Malcolm stood still, no reaction, only depth in his gaze. Lowell drew in a breath. "I received complaints about bias, coded language, subtle exclusion, and I dismissed them. I called it strong personality. I called it leadership style. But today, when I watched this man be erased from his own aircraft, I realized I wasn't protecting Linda. I was protecting myself from facing the truth." Naomi bowed her head slightly. "A silent thank you," Jared whispered. "Late, but not meaningless." Malcolm nodded. "Thank you, Captain Lowell, for choosing to speak up, even if you were the last. Lowell sat back down. He wasn't seeking forgiveness. He just wanted to end his chapter of silence with a confession. The cabin door opened again. Linda Crowley walked back in. Gone was the swagger, but she hadn't fully collapsed either. She was accompanied by a man in a gray suit, a lawyer. Linda didn't look at anyone. She simply said, "I've been defamed. I was recorded illegally. I intend to sue." A wave rippled through the cabin. Some passengers shook their heads. Jared muttered, "What now?" Linda's lawyer stepped forward, voice flat. Ms. Crowley requests a full cease and desist on media distribution and retraction of all internal and public statements. Malcolm didn't flinch. He turned toward the central screen, still on. "Jada," he said, "replay the handwritten notes by Linda, dated the 25th, passenger code 3A. The video played. Linda's hand scribbled. "Black female, high heels, possibly faking credentials." Naomi gasped. Chloe looked down at her shoes. The cabin fell silent. Malcolm turned to the lawyer. "Let the cabin judge." The footage continued. Accented male, track movement, suspected agitator. Linda snapped. "Those are internal notes, not policy." Naomi lifted her gaze. "But you turned notes into exclusion." Malcolm added, neither cold nor angry. "Discrimination doesn't need a signature. It just needs your silence." The lawyer said nothing. Linda didn't move. The truth this time wasn't silenced. It was projected, fully, publicly. The cabin returned to stillness, but not out of fear. Not from authority, but because, for the first time, they had all seen. Malcolm stepped to the center aisle. He wasn't a hero, not a speaker, not a saint. He was simply a man who stood up and stayed. "Justice doesn't fly itself," he said. "We're the ones who carry it, seat to seat, flight to flight." No one responded, but every back straightened. Omar closed his notebook. Naomi closed her eyes. Jared gripped his pen tighter. Chloe exhaled for the first time in hours, not to defend herself, but to begin again. A young passenger from the back row murmured, "I've never seen someone make an entire system confess its own fault." Malcolm turned toward the window. The sky had cleared. The sunlight wasn't shining on power. It was shining on the people who, one by one, chose not to stay silent. From the intercom came a final voice. "Cabin secure, ready for takeoff." And this time no one doubted it. Because everyone knew this flight, at last, was guided by the truth. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher, one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.